Audits and Animal Welfare Committee. I would note that we have a quorum with myself, Councilmember Paul Koretz, and my colleague, Councilmember Mike Bonin. Our third member, Councilmember Harris Dawson, will not be able to be present today. So if we could begin with a roll call.
Yes, Councilmember Koretz.
Present.
Councilmember Harris Dawson. And Councilmember Bonin.
Here.
Excellent.
We have a quorum. I'm going to ask, once public comment is satisfied, that we take items 1 through 7 on consent.
Okay.
But first, let's begin with public comment.
Those who wish to speak, please press star 9 in order to unmute yourself. Caller with the last 4 numbers 4333. Please let us know your name and the items you'd like to speak on.
And I would note I'll note you have 2 minutes for items on the agenda and 1 minute for public comment if you so choose.
Yes, my name is Whitney Smith and I only have public comment. My public comment is as follows. Last week, we all at the LA Animal Services Commission meeting were horrified to be informed that there is no more money enough in the spay and neuter trust fund to fund the 3 spay and neuter mobile vans that go into the low-income communities in Los Angeles. Let's face it, Los Angeles is mostly low-income communities more than wealthy. The outrageous situation that we live in a city that's going to host the Olympics, and we don't even have enough money to fund these mobile vans are the only thing that's spaying and neutering animals in communities that don't have vouchers in hand, don't have transportation. And Larry Gross is the commissioner president. His thing is, well, you know, we don't make the budget, so why don't you guys go to city council and ask for money? That was literally what he told us. If you don't do something about this spay and neuter trust fund, you want to see what's going to come into the shelter? You think it looks bad now? Just wait. There's thousands of animals that are not going to get fixed. And Brenda Barnett squandered that spay and neuter trust fund. We knew this was going to happen. She gave it back to the city. She didn't invest it. And now this is where we're at. Can you believe that? We have no money, let me repeat, to fund the mobile vans that have been funded since 2015. Someone needs to look into this now before everyone's pregnant. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I would note that you know, we will take a look at that issue. Thank you for flagging it for us.
Caller with the last 4 numbers 6281. Please press star 6 to unmute yourself and let us know your name and the items you'd like to speak on. Please press star 9 if you'd like to speak. Okay, they are not responding. Caller with the last 4 numbers 6281. Please press star 6 if you'd like to speak and let us know your name and the items you'd like to speak on. And they are not responding. We can come back to them at the end of the meeting if you'd like, or we can just go forward with the meeting.
So are those the only speakers?
This is the last speaker, yes.
Okay, why don't you repeat the number 1 more time and then let's close public comment if they don't come on.
Caller with the last 4 numbers 6281, please press star 6 to unmute yourself and let us know your name and the items you'd like to speak on. And no response.
All right, so we will close the public hearing. And first, I'd like to ask us to take items 1 through 7 on consent, if there's no objection.
No objection.
If none, please call the roll on those items.
Councilmember Koretz. Councilmember Koretz
Aye.
and Councilmember Bonin.
Aye.
Very good.
Those items pass, and the actions that we'll be taking on them, item number 1 is to approve a re-exemption. Item number 2 is to approve the re-exemption. Item number 3 is to approve the Community Investment for Families Department's report. Item 4 is approve the Economic and Workforce Development Department's report. Item 5 is to approve the CAO and City Attorney reports and City Attorney draft ordinance. Item 6 is to approve the CAO and City Attorney reports and City Attorney draft ordinance. And item 7 is to approve the CAO and the City Attorney reports and the City Attorney draft ordinance. Next, I think because we have 2 very extensive items, I'm going to begin next with item number 10. There is a very slim chance that I might have to leave this meeting urgently, and if so, Mr. Bonin, we would leave you to chair the meeting on item 8 and 9, which you're obviously familiar with as you're one of the presenters of that motion.
Well,
Hopefully won't.
I'd hate to run a meeting with me in it, but I'll do it if I have to.
Okay,
But meanwhile, we will do item number 10 first.
item 10, Information Technology Report relative to the status of Human Resources and Payroll Project.
Thank you. And I'd like to start with an opening statement on this. Given the long period of time since we've had an HRP discussion in this committee, I want to take a few minutes to remind everyone of a few facts and some recent history about why the Hrp project matters to every city employee. The city's current payroll system, PACER, was developed and implemented in the year 2000, 21 plus years ago. Imagine the technology on your car from 2000. The PACER system is a 20-year-old custom designed system that lacks the capability of a modern HR and payroll system. And let me just remind you that successful implementation means we can have a modern system with accurate and timely computation of payroll, accurate and timely records of employee human resource and payroll data, streamlined and consistent city HR and payroll processes for better efficiency and fiscal accountability, enhanced capability for city management and employees to easily access and utilize employee data, enhanced workflow and reduction of manual processes to allow staff to focus primarily on issues that require their expertise rather than data entry, implementation of a system based on modern technology, managed by a vendor that provides regular upgrades and dependable support, and the complete and successful retirement of the PACER system. If we believe our employees are our greatest asset, and I certainly do, then I don't know what a more important undertaking is than modernizing a sustainable system that can provide timely, accurate payroll, efficiency reports, and compliance with federal, state, and local laws far into the future. We need to work now to assure this project is successful. It is long past time. It is because this project is so important to our employees, and by the extension, the citizens they serve, that I need to clearly express my disappointment at this late stage in the process that we had to extend the contract. For this reason, this committee added several key measures designed to improve accountability and protect the city's investment in HRP. First, the HRP leadership team is now required to provide monthly reports to the Personnel and Animal Welfare Committee to chart progress and assure no further surprises for the council. Second, the CAO is reporting today on the completion of a contract with a quality assurance or QA consultant. The PA committee added the QA as a requirement for additional HRP funding. So the council has an independent and ongoing assessment and reporting tool to hold the departments and contractor accountable. The use of a QA is a well-established best practice among large public sector technology projects, best described as a common sense insurance policy to make sure leadership is receiving timely, accurate, and objective data on progress of the project, risks, and expected bumps in the road. In short, we want no further last-minute surprises. I'd like to take this opportunity first to thank the HRP lead departments on your January project status report. Given the limited amount of time we have to go over this report, I'm not going to ask that the report be summarized, but instead have the committee answer specific questions and ask these specific questions of the lead departments to flesh out information on the following issues. The City Council instruction to the HRP team noted that the team was to return to this meeting with a consensus recommendation on the most appropriate date for Phase 1 go live. Since the report does not clearly indicate if all 4 departments have a consensus date or not, we'll explore that issue today. The QA consultant needs to provide truly independent reports and recommendations to the council via this committee, and have the city QA project manager be committed to allow the QA the necessary and appropriate independence from the HRP leadership team to make the engagement useful to city leadership. We will also explore this issue. And I would note my concern that the QA was chosen without council input. That was clearly a direction of our last direction to our committee here and to the task force. Finally, multiple department leaders have reached out to our office to express concern that the testing, training, and implementation schedule may not be realistic given limited resources. We will explore this question today as well. So I want to begin with questions for the personnel department. And so provided that personnel department oversees HR functions for 27 city departments, it's very important that the HR support staff be prepared for the transition to Workday in April. As of today, what's the status of personnel staff in terms of readiness?
Good afternoon, Councilmember Koretz, members of the committee. Wendy Macy from the Personnel Department. As you know, we've got 40 separate city departments that are out there that are going to be users of the system. Personnel department staff are in 27 of the 40 departments, but the others, of course, are independent departments. So I'll kind of answer on behalf of both, just speaking about people in the field in general. They have a conceptual understanding, obviously, of HRP coming. Robin, who I see on the screen, has been working on our change management communications, but they don't really have the details yet. Because the training is yet to be forthcoming and some of the testing is still going on. So it's still early right now to really assess what their readiness is or their detailed knowledge of the system. But I would say, yes, they've been completely apprised. They know it's coming. They know something is coming. They don't know exactly what it is probably the fairest assessment. I would say within the next 30 days, we'll have more data, seeing how testing is going and in more communications with the departments to see where we are. But I know that the training component is not coming until like 30 days before the system goes live. So again, that'll be another data point where we'll be able to have a better answer as to how ready and how knowledgeable the departments are.
So the staff working on this system, how familiar and prepared do you think they are at this point for what's coming?
So it's you think of it as concentric circles. The team members and I that have been working very hard on this project from day one, I think are very familiar with how this is going to change HR processes out in the field. They understand the details of how something was input in Pacer versus how it's going to be happening in Workday, I think very, very well. I think there are others who have sort of a medium knowledge probably of understanding this. But in many ways, you know, it's really going to be a seismic shift in the way that some of these transactions are handled out in the field. So again, there are probably some people who are more peripheral to the project who probably have less of an understanding. So, you know, that's, and I'm sure you know this has always been a concern of the personnel department, given our experience with previous system implementations that we've had to go through, including very recently.
Yeah, my concern as well, for sure. Will there be any need for departmental HR sections to change their internal procedures or their staff assignments in order to adapt to how transactions are performed in Workday?
Again, it's going to be what we call a seismic shift. So I think it's going to be a completely different way in which processing employee transactions, positions, gathering data, reporting information. And so again, the engagement is going to be critical because right now, I mean, to be frank, I never go in the Pacer system myself, right? I have support staff who are able to pull up that data. They run reports for me. And so I would not be the best person to talk about what a supervisory organization is or a difference between a job profile and a job organization classification. Those things that the technical experts do, some of these things are fundamentally and conceptually different from the way we've done it, probably different in a better way. So again, it's great that this is happening, but again, the idea is that we want to make sure that people really understand the depth and breadth of some of these changes that they'll be asked to do. I'm bearing in mind, of course, that HR staff, and again, I'm not just speaking of my own, but others have been extraordinarily busy during this pandemic. They've done yeoman's work. They've had to tasks placed upon them that they never thought they would ever have to do. And so this is just going to be one additional thing that's going to be placed on top of that. And so we just want to make sure they have the readiness to do so.
Right, and that's one of my concerns. I mean, this is a concern of mine. If we had never had COVID, that we do all of this with appropriate readiness, because other places that have had now somewhat predictable disasters. So if it's just placed as just another duty, I'm fearful that we won't have the kind of focus that we need to pull this off in an appropriate way. And I wonder if there's anyone you have on your team technically that might respond to that.
I'm not sure that they had the paw invite on them. They may be listening on the phone. So I'll do the best I can. I mean, I can sort of compare because again, within the personnel world, there have been several system implementations. The My Voice LA, the NeoGov candidate, management system, the Cornerstone training system, the perks that you're familiar with, and those were primarily done, pre-COVID. And more recently, of course, we've been dealing with some of the vaccine tracking system, and that's sort of been our post-COVID experience. And obviously, there are many factors in play, but it's been very challenging. It's been very challenging getting that rolled out because, in part, because of some of the operational challenges with dealing with remote workforce in the COVID environment, but also, again, with the rush of additional things that people are asked to do. I mean, remember, these are people whose primary day job is to hire people. And so anything that they're spending doing this or other things or implementing this other vaccine system, taken away from their hiring duties. So they're very, very stressed. They're very, very pressed for time. They may not necessarily absorb all the communications that were sent out to them in terms of this is training, this is how you log in. Things were kind of done sort of soft launch and then on the fly. And then so when instructions changed, many people didn't notice the email that said, oh, now your login information is different. So we would get, dozens and hundreds of calls of people getting errors on the old system. So we adapted to that. And we always said, hey, these lessons learned that we want to apply when we actually roll out Hrp. So I just wanted to share that with the committee. And from a technical point of view, that's some of the challenges that we faced in the COVID environment.
So that sort of leads to one of my greater concerns, that do we have sufficient resources to provide frontline support that's responsive to user departments during phase 1 and phase 2 implementations? Or are there more things that we really need to pull into this?
And we appreciate sort of some of the responsiveness that we've gotten in terms of requests for resources from the motion from your office. Obviously, if we're looking at an April go live, then the peak periods of the project are going to be right before and right after, which is in the current fiscal year. So it's critically important that we have people really right there when the matter goes live to be able to answer people's questions in a timely manner. Otherwise, if people are not able to do routine transactions, or they're not well versed enough on how to onboard a new employee or whatever, these are things that can have repercussions in terms of hiring, getting people situated, and then it may actually, even though it's not technically the payroll part of the HRP, these transactions will impact someone's pay. And so what we don't want to have happen, of course, is any inadvertent errors taking place, because then that just sort of snowballs upon itself. So definitely resources working with departments to ensure that these transactions are processed, and doing this post go live support, I think is the critical period of the project. And so we would obviously welcome a lot more resources on that, and knowledgeable resources about city processes would be most helpful.
So what's your current confidence level on the successful Workday to Pacer integration within the next 30 days? I know it's needed, as I understand it, to go live in April. And has employee benefits staff confirmed that data brought from Workday and translated to Pacer will assure that we have no disruptions to the various benefits personnel administers for city employees?
So we've obviously focused a lot of our attention on the first phase of the project, which is the HCM project, part of the project. Benefits is slated to go with payroll in the next phase, but I know that we have been concerned about, at the same time that we're working very hard, and the whole team, I mean, ITA and the project management team, and controller and CAO, the entire team's been working very hard, focused on the first phase. But we just don't obviously want to be right where we left off when we go into the second phase, because that's going to be a heavy lift on benefits. I will say that we are losing a key team member that's on the Hrp project team that is very knowledgeable about the benefits portion of it. So we're working very hard to try to address that challenge. There's just been a lot of movement among HR staff really everywhere. And so we're struggling to try to make sure that we have knowledgeable people in the benefits piece. At this point, I think ITA Workday has some associates are still working on some of these integrations. And so I think we would have a better answer, hopefully by the February Paul meeting.
Mr. Chair, I'm sorry, Ted Ross with ITA. The integrations are a responsibility of ITA working with Workday. If it would help the committee, we could provide additional background, or we could provide it later.
Why don't we have you provide it when we get to ITA?
Not a problem.
Because I'm trying to get the opinions of various departments. So, Wendy, based on your analysis to date, what do you think the optimal date is to begin phasing? Are we still on track for April?
We're still in testing. Everyone's worked really hard. We need to test the fully developed integration. And from a user readiness, it's hard to say. I think we would have a better comfort level or a better understanding of whether the April date. I know we're committed that we would go no earlier than April. which I think it's not going to go any earlier than April. But we just still need, I think, additional testing information before we can definitively answer the question about what the actual best date is going to be. But I'll just say that, you know, I hate to punt, but we need to really get some additional clarification. I know that, you know, we've gotten a lot of information, good information about things are being planned, things are being thought of, things are being considered. It's, you know, really when we have that testing more complete, I think we would have a more thorough answer of what would be the optimal date. But definitely, like, we're still really early to be able to answer that question.
I appreciate it. And I've got a few questions for the controller's department. I don't know who is representing the controller today, but
Krista Binder, Chief Deputy Controller, and also here with me is Janet Laszlo, our Hrp Project Manager.
perfect. Okay, so the Hrp report, as requested, has commentary on the effort to address the 4 recommendations from the controller related to project communication. Can you provide any detail or additional detail on the concerns and the response, and whether you now feel the issues you raised initially have been resolved or not?
Certainly. So I think previous to the committee supporting our recommendations, we were being given presentation materials and not actively participating in the compilation of those materials. We have seen really a fundamental shift in participation, not only from the steering committee members, but basically from the people doing the work, the heavy lifting. That's the work stream leads. They are now driving content in the steering committee presentation materials. They're building slides, they're actually presenting. It's been wonderful to hear their voices and their concerns as well as accomplishments. So I think that's really provided a level of more specificity to what everybody is working on. So we at least from the controller standpoint, have really appreciated all of that interaction.
And what role do you anticipate the QA can play to work on the leadership and communication challenges that you raised in prior reports and meetings?
Yeah, I mean, we're very supportive of the QA. We know that their onboarding is imminent. I think just having that independent look into the project, unbiased, completely objective, would not only help the perspective of to the committee of what you're hearing from everyone on the project, but also to, you know, to level set with the business owners, us sponsors. You know, are we going about this the right way? Are we missing things? Are we not seeing what we're supposed to be seeing? I think we need that extra layer of information to help us guide us to a better outcome. Even if the project gets delayed a month or 2 months or 3 months, having that support, I think, will only, you know, help the success overall.
And have you heard from the operating department leaders since the new phase schedule was announced with respect to whether their departments have the resources they need and can complete the testing and training work assigned to them within the new timelines?
You know, I've heard directly from a few. Obviously, everybody's struggling with bandwidth, not just because of their day-to-day work, but, you know, the COVID issues and loss of positions during the budget. I think what I'm hearing is there are some gaps in developing business processes on how I'm using the system. I know of one department specifically that has contracted out that work independently to get that level of support, and to a consultant that has previous Workday experience. They're very engaged and they want to do a great job, but they need that extra support. So that's just an example of one department reaching out to us. I couldn't tell you about others, but maybe some of the other steering committee members have heard from other departments.
And what's your overall assessment of how the project is going from a payroll risk management standpoint?
I think from payroll risk management for this phase 1, you know, we're minimal. We have a couple of things that we are, you know, tasked with. That's payroll elections and tax elections. And, those can't go wrong. They have to be accurately calculated. I think one of the biggest concerns for us is the integrations from Workday to Pacer, understanding what's missing, if anything, or any kind of workarounds. I think those would be some of our major concerns.
And based on where we're today, what do you think of our current phasing, and is there an optimal date that's different than the dates we're looking at now?
I think we're pretty much in the same boat with the personnel department. It's too early to tell. I want to see the results of testing. I want to see the results of testing being successful. I want us to be signing off and feeling confident about those results. The second part is departmental readiness. We still haven't seen training materials. Internal controller operations staff have not participated in any readiness activities. I want to see the QA come on board and work with us and give out a report. So at this point, I can't tell you if we're on track to meet that middle April timeline or not. We just don't have enough information.
Okay, well, thank you. Appreciate it. Next, I have some questions for ITA in a similar vein. Do you anticipate that the city will successfully test what needs to be tested, and that we'll see a smooth transition to Workday in April, or should we be looking at a later date at this point?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ted Ross, General Manager with ITA. Testing, as you know, and as you stated very well in the introduction, is a critical component of any system. I'm very glad to say that multiple rounds of testing have been completed. We've recently put together a dashboard that was included in the report that kind of summarizes a very lengthy project plan, and it summarized it based on the test scenario preparation as listed in the report. It shows which department is accountable for, let's say, the scenarios and where they stand. As of today, we're mostly completed with most departments, fully completed with some. It also shows for every week kind of the testing results and kind of where we stand. So department by department, they're at varying different results depending on what's being worked on. Honestly, and I think maybe Steve O'Donnell from Workday or Marty Hodgett from Accenture can elaborate, I'd say from a general take, if based on the work that has been completed up until now, and the progress that were made, if staff are working on testing, I feel like there's a great level of confidence in our ability to fully test this system successfully before go live. But I would yield to Steve O'Donnell, for example, from Workday, if he's seen something differently. He could also apply experience from other projects that they've been on.
Well, Mr. Chair, Steve O'Donnell, Managing Partner from Workday. I'm the City of LA's point of contact on behalf of Workday. I agree with Ted. At this point, looking objectively at the results of the initial results of the testing and where we're trending, we do not see, and based on our experience, we do not see any blockers that would prevent us from achieving April 10th.
Okay, and what do we think of departmental readiness for the April 10th go live? How are we assessing that so that we know that every department will be ready timely?
Yeah, another excellent question. I like you feel that the building of the system itself to perform the features is only a part of it. The user readiness for users to be able to adopt the software, use the software, and be successful on their day-to-day work is ultimately, I think, where software needs to be measured. I'm glad that we have Robin Murphy from Accenture, who has been, since the beginning of the project, working very closely with departments. And so I'd like to ask Robin, some of both the high-level measurements that you do in regards to department readiness, as well as some of the weekly conversations you have. If you could maybe describe for the committee what's been done and kind of to provide a bit of a gauge.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And thank you, Mr. Chair. Robin Murphy, I'm the change enablement lead for the project. So we're measuring department readiness for a lot of different metrics. Broadly, and you may have been aware, because I believe you were a part of the review on it, but we have a citywide survey that goes out to all end users to assess, both their awareness, their understanding, and then ultimately their readiness, which will be the the topic of the final survey. In addition, as part of our overall stakeholder engagement approach, we've met with every city department on multiple occasions and have also focused our attention on what we term our tier 1 departments, those that maybe have the highest amount of impact or represent potentially the highest amount of risk to the project. We meet with them monthly to work through their individual issues as far as, and even outside of my own area of change and training, in terms of overall department readiness and are they getting the questions they need. We're happy to say that we don't have any red flag departments amongst that group. They have individual issues that need to be resolved, and all are a part of our internal project read queue log and are represented as a part of the overall project plan. There haven't been any major surprises because we've kept this ongoing engagement and measurement throughout the run of the project, and we'll continue to do so through this year all the way through both phases.
And if I may add, there are certain aspects of this plan. We had actually a steering committee meeting this morning, and a lot of ways you could say that a project like this has been pulling out all the stops. And so what I mean by that, when we think of department readiness, we think of their ability to be able to make the shift in the process and use the new system when they go live. One aspect of it is the testing itself. Various departments have sent subject matter experts in to perform the testing. So they've already been receiving elements of training in the system, and it already gives us a bit of a gauge as to how well users can adopt the new system versus not. Secondly, there's a very extensive training program. It's summarized in the report. It even includes things like knowledge checks, where people, as they're doing the work online, it gives them kind of an online quiz, and it tests their ability to be able to perform the work. Those items then become graded, and they show us the ability of users as they're performing training, their ability to actually perform the work in the system. And I think a third really important aspect is pre-go live and post-go live support. Once again, pulling out all the stops. They have job guides, they have job aids, they have training, they video the training so you could rewatch it. They stagger the training so you could retake training if you had a hard time, let's say the first time performing the training. They break in the training into user roles, and so there's different kinds of class depending on the nature of the work that you do. And so I honestly, I'm not saying it just to say it, I am very impressed by a lot of the methodology and a lot of the measurements. We had a question from an assistant general manager at personnel earlier today regarding like, how do we measure it? And the fact is these knowledge checks and other ones give us a means of actually measuring it and showing it. So, I piggyback on what Krista and Wendy said. I think the numbers should really drive our decision making. And fortunately, we have a lot of mechanisms in place that can inform us as to the success or a lack of success before we go live.
Well, that just answered a few of my questions. That helps. And I'll apologize in advance if you hear the gardener of the property next door, the joys of virtual activity. Also, my understanding is that an April Workday will go live with HR functionality, but payroll and time will continue to be handled in Pacer. So there'll be a need for Workday to feed HR information into Pacer, such as employee job appointments and salary, in order for Pacer to determine pay. So how far are we in terms of testing this approach and this part of the overall project?
Certainly. Before the decision was made to implement a phased approach, a lot of due diligence was done on the ITA programmer side, the Workday side, and even working with Bob Hess, who runs the Pacer system, to help make sure that we knew we weren't signing ourselves up for something that couldn't be accomplished. I don't know, Steve, if you want to take a tack on that to be able to provide, or Raylyn, to be able to provide a little background on how the integration's been going, understand the idea that obviously a phased approach requires those integrations to work in the work rate.
Sure thing. I can start, and Raylyn, feel free to add on. But when we have this phased approach, it's basically going to be a front end to your Pacer system. Now, understanding that, we have to map what values exist in Workday into the values that would appear as if Pacer was being entered by someone directly into a keyboard in mass. So in a periodic basis, we have to take that information and place it into Pacer. Now, we have developed that. It's in testing right now. We expected, and we are receiving some changes working with the vendor, Bob Hess, on his side, and we have multiple check-ins on a daily basis. So as we continue to test, that confidence continues to grow. And we ultimately are on a glide path to have a fully tested interaction or interface directly into Pacer so that we can be successful here.
And Steve or Raylene, based on the project plan, at what time frame should we be alarmed that, let's say, those Pacer integrations aren't working as expected? Because I think that's part of the conversation is, well, if it's not done now, when do we say, oh no, now is too late? What is the right time frame based on how all of this was planned out?
Right. So we are actively testing that right now. It is developed and we are testing the integration to Pacer. So if we get to late February and haven't been able to test something or still have some problems we can't address, that will be the time. If we don't have a mitigation plan, then there could be concern. But right now we don't have those signs.
And if it didn't go live at the time we planned, do we have a plan for corrective action?
I think the answer is certainly yes. We will not be implementing a failed system. That is for sure what we do not do. We can all read the newspapers and see implementations of failed systems. Quite often, those failed systems did not work before they implemented it. And so we have multiple milestones and checkpoints where the steering committee gets together and it does what they call a go or no go decision. So they say, based on the results of, let's say, the end-to-end testing cycle, are we as a steering committee ready to go live? That's why the questions posed to my colleagues, Wendy, Macy, Krista, and others are very apt questions, and their answers are as apt as any. Until we have data that shows and demonstrates the success of the system, we can't say for sure where we will be. However, we have a lot of confidence based on previous experience on prior testing cycles, et cetera, of where we expect to stand. So Raylene, to the Mr. Chair's question, what would be, let's say, a plan B if we, let's say, got to that late February timeframe? How would we necessarily approach it from a project perspective?
Again, it would depend on the issue. So is it critical? Does it truly prevent go live? Or is there an acceptable mitigation and workaround? And so we have structure within the project to make those decisions. Things get escalated, and whether it's the department leads or the steering committee, we bring all the data we can and make those decisions that way.
Yeah, so to your point, Raylene, it depends on the nature of the issue, the scope of the issue, and what impact it has on a go live. A good example of this, about a month ago, if you were to look at our dashboard, you see that reports were behind schedule. If you were to look at the dashboard today, you'd see the reports have caught up. So you quite often find on a month-to-month basis in a project, if something starts to fall behind, we reallocate additional resources, we put in the additional effort, and we catch up in those areas. So we can expect some of those between now and the go live. We can expect certain areas where it will require more attention versus less. And I think to their credit, I don't own any stock in Accenture, I don't own any stock in Workday, but I think to their credit, I have been seeing over the last 6 months substantial investments of resources and energy into any of our quote unquote problem areas.
Okay, and having said all that, what's your sense of an optimal date to begin phasing? Do you think we're still on track for April 10th, or should we be thinking about a slightly later date?
Yeah, from my perspective, from the ITA perspective, and I know it's shared by some others, it's extremely important to kind of do the work based off the numbers and see some of the results. Based on the results I've seen up to now, I think April 10th is the optimal go live date. And I would want to personally see evidence that showed our inability to be successful on April 10th before I would like to entertain a conversation otherwise, but I'm simply one vote out of multiple.
And it sounds like from the other folks we've spoken with today, there are some concerns, but nobody is waving a red flag yet that there's a danger. Everybody wants to see more data. So presumably we will do that as we look at this. Mr. Vaughn, it just occurred to me, I've talked to 3 departments so far, and I have not asked you as I dig myself deep out of the weeds on this, if you have anything you want to add or ask.
I'm good, thank you.
Okay, and I have a few more questions for the CAO. One of them is one of the primary interests the committee recommended hiring the quality assurance consultant for was to assure that the city council receives unfiltered professional input. However, in reviewing the task order solicitation, I see no reference to the QA reporting to council. And so I would ask, what steps has the CAO taken to select a city QA project manager who will assure the QA understands their primary responsibility is to provide unedited reports and recommendations to the council in addition to HRP leadership, and that this was really the council's priority deliverable in their efforts.
Good afternoon, Chair. Ben Sahel with the CAO. To respond to your question, I just want to make sure that we understand that bringing on a QA at this point required a heavy lift, and I want to thank our fellow members from the personnel controller and ITA that helped in putting together a task order solicitation so quickly after the last POC committee we were at.
Which we appreciate. Your speed was applauded.
So just bringing that forward, we got 3 proposals that were submitted. We did a review in December before we took some collective time away from the office. And then when we returned, because we had kind of streamlined the from 3 to 2, we needed some more information from the 2 that were kind of at the lead of the pack, if you will. And based on those follow-up conversations, we have selected or tentatively selected one firm. I want to assure you that we're still in the process actually of and we have a meeting later this afternoon to finalize this selection. We want to make sure that all the contract logistics are squared away because we are using a bench contract from the controller's office. We want to make sure that they're also okay with the process that we went through and provide that sign off. And so we're meeting with them today for hopefully final selection, if you will, of that. And at this meeting, we will make sure that they understand that their report that gets issued will be issued at the same time it is to the HRP steering committee that is issued at the same time to this committee, so that you will get exactly the same report, unfiltered, that we will be seeing on the HRP side. And with assurances that when this item gets agendized to at this committee, that they will be here to present the report and answer any questions you have on that report. I want to make sure that we also understand that the importance for the HRP to have this report is because we need to act on that report. If they are, raising any issues, I believe that it behooves this project that HRP have that information as soon as they can, to start working on the solutions to any problems that are raised. And so, based on that timing, we want to make sure that the people that need to do the work have that information and can start addressing any questions or issues raised. But at the same time, as I said to you, they will be available to come to this committee, as agendized.
Great. Well, I'm glad to hear that. And please also let the QA know that we would like them to provide a written monthly report and to appear in POC committee at least monthly with that report. So I'm pleased to hear that we're on that path. Let's see, I'll skip that question. I think I'd ask you just the same final question. Does the CAO's office have a sense on whether April 10th is still the optimal date to begin phasing or not?
We feel it is. We have raised concern as all the other departments have, just based on the issues of bandwidth for our staff that are working on this. But the way I see it, it's there are issues that are blockers, as referred to earlier, and there are issues that are important to have worked out, but not necessarily critical to have completely worked out before go live. And we feel that some of the issues we have raised are ones that we're going to continue to working to resolve those issues, but they're not blockers per se. There are issues that can continue to be addressed even after go live. And we expect that as we go live, there's going to be items that come up that need to be addressed. I believe that this phase approach is the best approach for success, and having something go now in April will and kind of working out any of the bugs that may appear after go live is critical before the really what everybody truly cares about. No offense to folks in the HR community, and that's the payroll, and that's the checks that people will get on this new system in January when that module goes live.
Right, and that's my priority as well, because I think that's been one of the areas of disaster for other places where they've done this without adequate focus and training and planning, which clearly is not the case here. I think we're very focused on it. I just want to make sure we don't try to take off before we're ready, because those that have screwed up the payroll part have paid for it and wound up with millions of dollars in extra costs, which is what my eye has been on, among other things, with this project from the beginning. So I thank you and especially ITA for providing this report and answering my questions. And for the next report, I should check in first. Mr. Bonin, did you have any questions for CAO?
No, I'm all good. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. For the next report, we'd like to see the following. One, a separate report from the Personnel Department on the impacts to ongoing operational needs of HR staff and activities with the phased approach, including confidence levels relating to a seamless transition for all employee benefits administered by the Personnel Department, and the potential errors with HR staff using both systems for a year. Number two, I'd like a report on the results of all the testing completed through February 15th and a written HRP leadership consensus recommendation on what the current thought is at that point on the most appropriate phase one go live date, whether it's still April 10th or whether there is another presumably later date. And three, the initial QA report and presentation that should include an independent assessment of the city's readiness to go live with phase one and recommendations regarding the most appropriate phase one go live date from the QA. So with that as direction, I would ask that we receive and file that report, and I guess we'll have a roll call on that step.
Yes, Councilmember Koretz
Aye.
and Councilmember Bonin.
Aye.
That item passes.
Very good.
All right, so we'll take item 8 and 9 together.
Very good.
And I would ask that we begin with a report on the items from the controller. If the controller could give us an overview of the report along with the recommendations of the department.
Okay, let me just read these off. Item 8 is motion Blumenfield, Bonin, Rahman, Rodriguez, relative to various improvements or changes to city sidewalk programs. This matter has also been referred to the Public Works Committee. Item 9, controller report relative to repairing Los Angeles' broken sidewalk strategy. This item has also been referred to the Public Works Committee.
Hi, good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. This is Devang Panchal, Director of Auditing with the Controller's Office.
I just want to quickly thank the committee for considering these recommendations. And also, I know we're joined by colleagues from several other departments on the call, and they were all instrumental to helping us get this project done. And I just want them to hear it from us that we're really grateful for their time and expertise throughout the entire process. With that being said, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Nick Ketter for a quick walkthrough of the report, and we'll be happy to answer any questions. Thank you, Nick.
Thanks, Devang. So I'll quickly go over the report. As you know, the BOE-led sidewalk repair program, which is also known as SRP, was set up to implement the terms of the Willett settlement in 2016. And that settlement required the city to spend about $1.4 billion over 30 years to address broken sidewalks. In 2016, the city also adopted a fix and release policy. And under that policy, the city rebuilds and certifies a parcel's sidewalks, and the maintenance responsibility is then transferred to the property owner. And that's important because this policy is implemented in tandem with Willett's settlement work. So overall, we found that SRP is making progress, but progress really needs to be faster. Public Works so far has issued about 4,500 sidewalk certificates. There are a few Srp sub programs that I can go over. First being access requests, which is when a disabled person can request a repair. It takes on average 646 days to complete a request from start to finish. And these delays are largely due to funding availability and the need for extensive engineering and design work for most cases. Another major factor with access requests is that along with the fix and release policy, we often replace a parcel's entire sidewalk when addressing a barrier, which can lead to situations where crews may be repairing more than is actually necessary. Second is repairs in front of city facilities, which is a requirement of the settlement. Unlike with access requests, the settlement requires us to replace the entire sidewalk in front of a city facility for most projects, which of course is both time and labor intensive. So far, BOE has finished repairs at about 60 facilities so far. And then lastly, outside of SRP itself, the city's ability to complete what would be considered just general sidewalk repairs is actually very limited. Those repairs are usually addressed by BSS with temporary asphalt repairs. And right now that process takes about 41 days to close out a request. We made a total of 15 recommendations in the report, and I'll just highlight some of the major items. We believe the city should examine whether to narrow the scope of certain sidewalk projects as opposed to repairing the entire length of the sidewalk. We think doing so could cut down on the need for extensive planning and design work and ultimately help the city address a greater number of access barriers. The city should modify SRP's prioritization system so that severely damaged sites that aren't necessarily specifically associated with city facilities can also be prioritized. The city should improve the ability of BSS to rapidly respond to reported sidewalk issues, which is important because it can reduce liability. And finally, the city should invest in a sidewalk condition assessment, which we as an organization currently do not have. So with that, we're happy to answer any questions, and we really appreciate your time.
Well, thank you so much, and for an important and effective report. Mr. Bonin, you were one of the makers of the original motion, so I'd like to start by asking you if you have comments and questions.
Well, sure. Let me, my mic is on. I want to start by thanking the controller for the report. I think it gives us a really welcome opportunity to look at the sidewalk repair program, which I don't think has been going anywhere near as well as anyone had hoped or anticipated. And for me, I think the audit really highlighted some fundamental flaws in the program's design. And a lot of those aren't BOE's problems or of BOE's making. Those are ones that they were well-intentioned dictates from the council that have had some really unintended consequences. And I think we have an opportunity now to try to fix those. From my vantage point as chair of T committee, sidewalks are really essential transportation infrastructure. And too often, we treat them as an afterthought, and we carve them out from the rest of our transportation planning and investment. And that leaves people walking or rolling left to fend for themselves with what are, pretty foreseeable consequences. Pedestrians are more likely to be injured and killed on our streets, and there's an unacceptable risk of tripping and falling when navigating our sidewalks. And the sidewalks are an enormous liability for the city. We're liable when they're unsafe, and we're liable when they're inaccessible. And unfortunately, the audit makes clear, to me anyway, that in an effort to shield the city from liability, there have been some bad decisions in creating this program. And the motion I co-authored here is an effort to begin unwinding some of those mistakes and better position the program to be successful in the future. So, what we want to do is direct BOE to talk to the sister agencies and make recommendations for changes, including revisiting prioritization and funding to better align our sidewalk repair policy with our pedestrian planning goals. Common sense. This motion also reopens the discussion around fix and release, a policy that has clearly failed to achieve its goal of reducing city liability, and instead has really sucked and diverted resources from higher priority repairs. And it also starts the process of finally creating a comprehensive citywide sidewalk inventory, something pedestrian advocates have been calling for decades, really. I should note, I appreciate and I support the amendments that were made by our colleague, Mr. Blumenfield, in Public Works Committee to highlight the funding needs in the coming fiscal year. We can and we must do a lot better. We owe it to everybody who uses the sidewalks in Los Angeles, particularly the people with disabilities who have limited mobility options, to get more accessibility per dollar spent, and to set up a program for scalability so that we can infuse even more funding into the program, particularly with new federal funding on the way. So I just want to thank the departments for the work ahead on this, as outlined in the motion. Thank Mr. Koretz for his work on this and for scheduling this. Given that we're giving some direction, I don't really have any questions I need to ask today, Mr. Koretz. I just wanted to sort of lay that out there.
Thank you, Mr. Bonin, and thank you for your good work and that of our colleagues as well on the original motion and the amendments. I have a few questions. First of all, for the controller, has the CAO reviewed the report for the fiscal implications of the recommendations?
I think that's best for CAO. I'm not aware of what financial analysis they've done yet, but we'll of course be happy to help them in any way we can.
I'll ask that of the CAO then.
Councilmember David Harana from the CAO's office. We've reviewed the audit itself and the recommendations, but a lot of the recommendations require some policy direction, further policy direction from your body, and some further development by the departments before we can really do a financial analysis of the changes.
Well, that makes sense. Question for BOE or Streets LA. In the universe of accessibility requests, repair rebate applications and city facility sidewalk repairs, as well as risk and liability mitigation repairs, would you walk us through how each of these programs are prioritized and funded?
Hi, good afternoon. Julie Souter with the Bureau of Engineering, and thank you to the committee and the Controller's Office. I just wanted to let you know I'm joined this afternoon with Julia Moy, who's a project manager for BOE Sidewalk Repair Program, and our ADA coordinator for the Public Rights of Way, Natalie Sparrow. So to answer your question, I'm going to start off with access requests. As Nicholas mentioned, access requests are those made by people with mobility disabilities. And per the settlement agreement, this is budgeted for 20% of our annual commitment. And this is a term in our settlement agreement, and that equates to approximately $6.2 million a year. And this is a minimum that the city commits annually. With respect to prioritization, all of our prioritization is done, was adopted by City Council in 2018, and the scoring system was developed in conjunction with the terms of the settlement agreement, as well as direction that we received from City Council. So for the access requests, those are prioritized solely by the settlement agreement, which prioritizes requests that are made for people in residential areas, as well as adjacent to transportation corridor, and requests that are over 120 days. So based on those three criteria, that is how the access requests are prioritized. For city facilities, I believe that you also had inquired about. City facilities are also prioritized by the settlement agreement, and that is also in conjunction with direction that we received from City Council. So for the settlement agreement, city facilities are prioritized for those locations that are adjacent to a transportation corridor. Also the type of facility, if it's a hospital or assisted living facility, those are also given a higher priority, along with places of public accommodation, places that are near commercial